Hi there, I'm Lily and I just spent half an hour talking to a camera that only recorded the first 8 seconds, so clearly YouTube Pro over here. Anyway, yes, I'm Lily, I am a knitwear designer and welcome to my YouTube channel. This is where I talk about my projects, my designs, my thoughts on life as a designer, things I've been making, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, life in the knitting industry. So thanks for stopping by. I'm Lilykatemakes on Instagram, at LilykateFrance on Ravelry, Etsy, you know, all the usual places, and everything will be linked down below. So it's been a while since I last filmed a video. Slight lie, I did film a video about a month ago and then realised it wasn't my finest. It was not my finest hour at all. I was in a bit of a funk design wise, kind of wasn't really feeling the things that I was working on. I'd had a failed sweater, wasn't feeling like I was in my groove with it, and I think it showed in the video. Like, it just came across quite negative and I thought, no, I'm not putting that out there, scrap that. I'll get the good kind of feeling back again soon, I know I will, and here we are, so I'm going to film again. I have so many things to share that I have written a list. I'll try not to keep glancing down at that over there. Kind of some new patterns, some revived old patterns, some events I've been to, sale that I'm doing, what I'm currently working on, some accessories, some little decorations, some Christmas things. There's a lot going on, so I'll try and get through it fairly quickly. I'll start with the item I'm wearing, which is my slow down sweater. The pattern is now available. It came out in October. And it's just a really nice, cosy, everyday sweater that just feels a little bit fancy. I think it's a good one for a video or for a Zoom or something like that with the sheer panel here. It's knitted in my yarn, which is Axis by Lilykate, in the shade Neutrino. So it's a worsted weight yarn, 90% merino, 10% undyed Surrey alpaca, and it's very lovely. I mean, of course I would say that, but it is. So yeah, the pattern is now available for this one, and also for the Albedo sweater, worn beautifully by Dolly Dearest over here. In my last video, I think I was working on this one. I'd only just done the yoke, so obviously it is now complete and the pattern available. This is the sweater version of my Albedo top, which was released earlier this year. So it is kind of, it's got a bit of fluff on it now. It's a hybrid of a circular yoke, obviously for this first section here, and then a set-in sleeve construction, which gives it a really nice fit around the underarm. There's no awkward pulling, there's no gaping. It's a good one. I'm going to pat myself on the back for that, hopefully you'll allow that. So yeah, you work a round yoke, then do some short rows to change the direction of knitting, add some increases, and then work the body obviously, and then the sleeves. You pick up around the underarm, replace these held stitches on the needle, and work some short rows again to kind of change the direction of knitting, and then work the rest of the sleeve. Which I felt like it needed to be a big poofy, it's not too big and poofy. I mean, relative to others I've done, this is fairly restrained, but I thought it needed the balloon sleeve to balance the whole look. Like, imagining that with a skinny sleeve, it just looks stupid. Oh, got a shiver there. So yeah, balloon sleeve gathered into a cuff with a little tuck there. I'm very happy with it. The pattern for the top and the sweater are both available separately or together as a little collection via Ravelry. So that's all out there in the world now. I was working on those last time. I'm paranoid about checking that this is actually recording, because I'm sure that red dot was there last time and clearly it was lying to me. And the other pattern that has been made available relatively recently in October was my Over It slipover, which again I showed in my last episode. I'll add some more photos of it now. I just loved it. I love it. It's my favourite. I say that about all of them, but really, really happy with how that turned out. And it was really nice as well that it was very well received on Instagram, which is obviously lovely. Thank you for everyone who leaves a comment or anything like that and supports in that way. But it was also really nice that, so I wore this slipover to both Yarndale and the Knitting and Stitching show, which I've attended in the last couple of months. I have a little section of the Emily Folds knits stand, so it's quite nice because I don't have to like commit to a whole stand. I just get a little section of it there where Laylee sells my yarn and we can sell my patterns. So I wore the slip over on both occasions and so many people asked me about it, which was really lovely to know that it worked in both knitting circles, because it's kind of yes, there's a lot of overlap between people who are part of the whole Knitstagram Ravelry online knitting community and in real life knitters, so to speak, you know, people actually buying yarn at events and in yarn shops, and obviously there is a lot of overlap. Obviously these are the same people for a lot of the time, however those Venn diagrams do not completely overlap. There are still a lot of people who, you know, have nothing to do with the whole online knitting community, who just, you know, go to events, go to yarn shops, and then maybe chat with a couple of friends, but they don't particularly, their knitting just stays in their home. So it's really interesting actually to see amongst those two, sometimes overlapping but sometimes very different groups of people, which items are popular. It's just interesting at these events to kind of observe which things, I was like, what people are wearing, what questions do people have, what are they buying, what are they not buying, what do people want to know, what do people ask for and you don't necessarily have, or it's just really, it's very interesting from a, I guess you would call it market research, but that sounds far too formal. It's just interesting to see, really. So I've lost my thread there. Oh yeah, so my point being that the slipover was very popular at these events as well. I was stopped and asked about my slipover that I was wearing so many times at both the Knitting and Stitching Show and Yarndale, which was just really nice. It felt very rewarding to receive those comments in person, and it wasn't particularly from any specific age demographic, I wouldn't have been able to say, oh, this is the kind of group of people who are interested in it. It was a really wide range, which for me as a designer, that's lovely to see. Obviously I don't want to have like, this is the people who like my patterns and that's it. I want that to be as, you know, as broad a range as possible, so that was very, very nice. So if you are one of those people who either asked me about my slipover or said that you follow me on Instagram or YouTube and came over and said hi and I probably squealed at you, thanks for making it all such a pleasant experience. It was so lovely and it was just lovely to meet everyone, so thank you very much for that. And yeah, the pattern is available in the normal places for the slipover. Moving on to actual new things I have to share. New/old, because so as I said when I filmed my last video, I was kind of not in the greatest frame of mind design wise, I don't think, and I thought, you know what, rather than trying to get myself stressed out over choosing what to design next, I'll give myself a little bit of breathing space by revisiting some old designs that weren't currently available. So I obviously designed them years ago and then the patterns are written up and I can still access those PDFs, but they weren't available at the moment. They were just sort of sat there at the bottom of my Ravelry doing nothing. You couldn't download them, they were just, you know, doing nothing. And I thought, that's silly. I mean, some of them I didn't particularly want to revisit, but some of them I thought, you know what, I either still like it or I went off it for a few years and now I like it again. It's either come full circle or I liked it the whole time anyway for some of these items. One of which was the Haslam scarf. So this is the first one that I decided to revisit. And I love the original sample and the yarn and the everything about it so much that I thought there's absolutely no need to redo it. It is just fine as is. So I designed this back in 2012. As you can see, it's a kind of crescent shape, so I guess you could call it a shawl, but I'm going with scarf. I designed it back in 2012, reblocked it recently, rephotographed it, reformatted the pattern and republished it. So it's now available again. The only sample of mine so far was knitted in Posh Yarn Eva, which at the time of publishing the pattern was discontinued. So it really is long gone, this actual base, which is a shame because it's so nice. It's a cashmere silk blend, so I'm sure you can imagine just how soft that feels. It has short rows, just giving a slight crescent shape. These garter panels get wider here than they are at the top. I've loved short rows for a long time, and these days I would wear it not with a bright pink sweater. I think that's a little bit too much, but just to show you, I'd sort of tie it. Oh, I'm trying to see in the viewfinder, I don't know if I'm doing it right. Yeah, cute. I like it, so decided to revive this one. So if you too are kind of feeling the skinny scarf or feeling the small shawl, whatever we're calling them, kind of style at the moment, here you go. There's just enough to the pattern to keep it interesting without being like too much going on, because there's, you know, it's mainly garter stitch based with that panel in the middle and obviously increases and some short rows. Yeah, Haslam scarf. That's the first one that I revisited. A couple more that I revisited, I'll show you in a moment. However, while I was on this kind of skinny scarf, small scarf, skinny scarf, little accessory, whilst I was in that zone, I made another, and this one actually is new. So this is called a knit bow tie, spelt like like beautiful, but then tie. It's a little pun. Thought it was funny, thought it was cute. And I wear it, how do I wear it, what am I doing? Oh my goodness. Pull yourself together, Lily. So this is how I've been wearing it. And this was another just a small project that I could just crack on with without having to stress about sizing or anything like that. So I actually really enjoyed knitting it. I made mine quite long, so I think mine is 57 inches blocked. So obviously that's very long, but it doesn't need to be so long. I just kind of thought, why not? Because I had plenty of yarn, I was enjoying it, and I quite like this style. Tied in a little bow, or in a little knot there. I've not actually tried tying it in a bow, let's see. Maybe, maybe not, don't know. But yeah, there are multiple different ways to tie it. I did a little Instagram reel showing that. And funnily enough, I've been asked about this yarn loads of times, and people have assumed it's something far more fancy than it is. It is Wendy Happy, which I think is discontinued now. It's been in the stash for ages and ages, and it's just a sock yarn, fairly cheap. 75% bamboo, 25% nylon, self-striper. So the idea was that this would look like a kind of fancy, expensive designer silky scarf, but it's just done with self-striping sock yarn. So obviously you could use whatever yarn you so wished, and it can also be made to whatever size. You begin with this point here and make a square, working out from the point, and then you do the same for the other side. Make two little squares, and then these two sides of the square here are just left on scrap yarn while you work this way, and then the same for this way. So all just knits, no purls. Gives you this nice chevron look, and it just drapes so nicely. And I found it actually to be very useful. At first I thought, I'm not sure how warm it will actually be, or you know, how practical is it, just a fashion accessory. But then I have found that with sweaters like this, my Cadogan sweater particularly, because it's got a square neck, I don't want to cover that up with a big bulky scarf, but just having this little tie underneath my coat has been just enough to kind of add a bit of warmth without being too much. So surprisingly practical. The difference it makes, even though this is bamboo nylon, it's not like it's wool or anything particularly warm. Just having that around your neck, having your neck covered, makes a surprising difference. So again, available in all the usual places, the knit bow tie. So the next item I have to share with you is another small one, but it's not an accessory. I branched out even further from my usual garments into little decorations. This is the Knitted Housey pattern, which I thought would just be a fun thing to do alongside my Advent sale. So throughout December, a different pattern is 20% off every day. I'm sharing this over on Instagram, and the discount applies on Payhip, Ravelry and Etsy. Payhip and Ravelry, you use code ADVENT22 and the discount is automatically applied on Etsy. So I knew I was going to do that, but I thought it'd be nice to throw in a little extra something just, you know, for Christmassy silliness. Hence the... Oh, have I dropped one? Oh no, it's there. Hence the little housey project. So with every Advent purchase you also get the Knitted Housey pattern. As you can see, they are very cute. This one's my favourite. It was supposed to look like a Georgian townhouse or something. I used yellow card inside to hopefully look like the lights are on inside the windows. I'm not quite sure how effective that was, but that was the idea anyway. This is the tiniest one that I started with. This one's not quite showing up too well in this look. So I used Jamiesons and Smith jumper weight, which is left over from a kit that my mum purchased years ago in these 9 natural neutral shades. So it's beautiful, it's a classic yarn, very woolly, very woolly, very sheepy obviously, and I thought it'd be nice to kind of, because this is sort of a bit of a novelty gimmicky kind of item, to do it in a really classic rustic palette rather than picking bright colours or anything. So might hang them from the tree, might just prop them up on a shelf, not sure. But yeah, I just thought they were really cute and would make a nice little gift, or just something fun to make, because obviously they're very quick. Each of these I knit in like in an evening, but I could have probably knit more than one in an evening if I tried, maybe apart from this one. And then in the round there's a little bit of a detail to create this sort of ledge at the side of the roof, because I didn't want them to just go straight up, and then in I wanted there to be a little like where the gutter would be, but you know, just to make it look ever so slightly more realistic. And then you insert the piece of card at the end and close the bottom with mattress stitch. So they're very satisfying to make. I really enjoyed it, and this yarn was, it was really nice to use a proper sheepy woolly yarn actually. The Ulysse, the Rerum Natura Ulysse that I used for my Albedo sweater was also a woolen spun kind of grippy yarn, but this is even more kind of gritty. So it was nice because I use a lot of smooth yarns and my yarn is quite smooth and it's a worsted spun, so this felt like a nice change. I really enjoyed making them. And for someone who doesn't tend to gravitate towards itty bitty projects, that is surprising because yeah, it's not normally my thing. But other than the pointed roofs where obviously you get down to only a couple of stitches, for the most part it's not too tiny to be uncomfortable, which is where I kind of draw the line really. Anything too fiddly where you're trying to fit your fingers into a tiny little circumference of a needle, and it's just, no, I don't enjoy that. But these are just a nice size to not get into that, ugh, this is a pain in the ass territory. Anyway, so yeah, you can get the Knitted Housey. I came up with a very imaginative name there. You can get the pattern individually in all the usual places, or with any of the Advent purchases throughout December, the house pattern will be included automatically with those. Now to jump back to more old patterns that I have revisited, the next is my Kentmere cowl. Just going to hold it up first. It's 2 loops. Looks like you should be able to untangle it. You can't. So there are 2 Mebius loops here, interlocked between, I don't really know how to explain it, yeah. There are two interlocking Mebius loops basically. I first did this design years ago, and the idea being that if I found with a lot of knitted cowls, fluff on me there, they look pretty sort of laid out flat, and then you put them on and they just go bleh, and they just crumple, unless they're in like a really substantial thick fabric, in which case, you know, that's quite bulky. They just kind of crumple to nothing and become more of like a glorified necklace and don't really serve the purpose of keeping your neck warm because the fabric has nothing to hold it up. However, in this case, adding the twists means that the fabric can't crumple, or it can only crumple so far, I should say. I'll just put it on. So because of the Mebius twists and the fact that these two loops are interlocking, it can't really crumple because it's automatically got that kind of rumpled, oh, I just threw it on, it's just, you know, it just lands all rumpled and holds itself up. It automatically has that because it can't untwist. So that was the whole idea behind this project that I first designed 13 years ago, something like that. And I do still have some of my old samples of it, but I'm not really feeling that. I wanted to change a couple of things about it, keeping the overall principle and the technique the same, but I wanted it to be shorter and wider. So here we are. The pattern it's more of a method than a pattern, I should say, so it can easily be done at any gauge. Can be, you know, 4-ply, super chunky, whatever you so wish. And usually I try to use a yarn weight that is easily either available or substitutable, because I don't want to create a fabric that's then hard to replicate and it's difficult for people to actually make their own. Oh, I've got loads of mohair stuck to my eyelashes now. But because in this case gauge doesn't really matter because you can change it easily anyway, I thought, sod it, I'm just going to be indulgent here. So I've had these skeins of mohair dyed by the lovely Paula of Mama Bear Yarns. She dyed them for me last year after I just mentioned that I was looking for some kind of subtly variegated mohair at last year's yarn dale, and then the next day she turned up with something she dyed for me, which was just the loveliest thing ever. So thank you very much, Paula. And I have been wondering what to do with it, because I was thinking about doing a garment with the mohair either held double or in my yarn held with mohair, but I wasn't sure I'd have quite enough, because I thought if it's a kind of loose fluffy fabric it needs to be a fairly oversized garment, but I didn't think the 6 mini skeins I'd have would quite go that far, and I was kind of like, not sure what would be the best use of it. And then I thought, you know what, I'm just going to be really indulgent and use it in an accessory because the gauge doesn't matter here. So I did one loop with my yarn held with mohair, so with this combination. So that's Axis by Lilykate, so worsted weight held with Paula's hand-dyed mohair there, and that gives this fabric, which I used a 6mm needle, so it's quite nice and drapey. And then for the other loop here, I just used the mohair held triple, which I've never done before. I'm trying to not do too much like holding strands together and making weird combinations, because then obviously it is more difficult to substitute. But like I said, it didn't really matter in this case, so I used 3 of these held together, which has made the most interesting fabric. Like if you look at the dye, look at the colours in here, it's got a kind of sea glassy look to it, with the little bits of the darker grey and then these pops of turquoise. And then when 3 strands are held together, I'm not sure how well it's going to show up in this light, gave a kind of marbly look, where obviously sometimes you get different colours together, sometimes you get a patch of 3 lots of the darker yarn, just it's so nice and so light and fluffy. And here you can see how it's all interlocked. So you could just use the same yarn throughout, that's what I did in my original samples, but I thought I preferred this version with it kind of highlighted the fact that it's 2 loops a bit better, so I just think it works really nicely. It kind of looks like you're wearing a double layered thing even though you're not. The more I faff around with it, the more, oh, that's interesting. Case in point, I hadn't actually kind of overlapped them like that before. I don't know how I've done that. Literally done that by messing around with it and seeing how it falls. Let's just pop that on. And that's that's how that looks there. Interesting. Yeah, the more you mess around with it, the more different ways you can see it kind of lies and can be worn. Interesting. Frizz my hair up now, because I'd originally thought, oh well, I can either have the attached bit at the back and then all the bulky bit at the front, or the join at the front and then can kind of use it like a sort of mini headscarfy kind of thing. Gosh, red lipstick, this is brave, isn't it? Yeah, like, so it's kind of higher at the back, you know, if you're trying to keep the wind out there, like a little, you know how the Queen wears her scarves kind of thing. Not balaclava, but sort of getting that way. Yeah, many possibilities, and it was a really enjoyable knit. Again, a basic one that I knit the most of the cream section whilst putting the world to rights over a couple of bottles of red with my friend. Didn't spill a single drop on it, so I think you should be proud of me for that, because obviously it's so simple, it's just garter stitch. It could be any reversible stitch, could be moss stitch, could be brioche, that would be lovely. Could be any number of fancy stitches if you so wish, but I just did garter stitch. So yeah, I was able to knit most of it, and most of that side whilst with my friend, and then a big chunk of this side whilst with another friend in the pub. So if you need nice, simple knitting for during your festive gatherings, can recommend. So this is the Kentmere cowl, which the pattern, I'm filming this on Thursday, hoping to have this edited tomorrow, and hoping to have the pattern for this also ready tomorrow, so fingers crossed that will all line up nicely. If not, just keep an eye on my Instagram and my newsletter and it will be available soon. Yeah, I hope you like it. It's just a little bit different, and I've actually worn it a few times already. It's nice to keep your neck warm without having the scarf all hanging down and getting caught in your zip and all of that, but also not a cowl that flops, so enjoy. Kentmere cowl. I love mohair, and I'm quite happy to wear it around my neck. Doesn't itch me, doesn't bother me at all. It does stick to your lipstick, and I think I've got it in my glasses. Oh well, anyway, moving on to more mohair on that note, and another pattern that I've revisited. So my Kirkstone hat, I actually still like. Oh, for God's sake. I still like the original version, or at least I like the photos of it, because I cannot for the life of me find it. I'm certain I wouldn't have given it away, but I've moved house like 4 times since then, and who knows where it is. So I knew I had to reknit a new one, whether I liked it or not there. So the first version that I reknit, the original is very slouchy, and I know a few people said it was kind of a bit too big. So I took a couple of repeats out and made it a little bit smaller. But it's still like a slouchy kind of shape. I mean, the slouchy shape was the thing back then. And then, I'll just ignore the absolute state of my hair poking out around it, but I know some people still like the shape. So I made this in the Rowan felted tweed left over from my Time sweater, held together with Shibui Silk Cloud that they sent me as part of a PR package a couple of years ago. So this is how the yarns look. I'm just going to take it off. Separately, and then when held together. So it was interesting actually that when I used this same felted tweed held together with a light coloured mohair in my Time sweater, you could see a very obvious marl to the fabric. However, when held with this grey, which clearly they don't match, I mean they're not the same colour, but it doesn't look as obvious a marl. It's just interesting, just kind of gives that nice fuzz, which I'm really enjoying at the moment. So the felted tweed is kind of a sport weight to DK, and then this mohair is quite fine, so it knits up to a substantial DK, I would say, is the total equivalent. And yeah, I kept this slouchy-ish style because I know a lot of people do still like that, and I just kind of wanted to see how it turned out. And then on me, I don't know if it's just because I've got a big head, like really quite a big head, so anything that then adds extra bulk without being a beret. I don't know, let me know what you think, because I'm not 100% about this shape on me, and I think I'm going to re-photograph it on my friend who has a smaller head and is blonde, and I feel like it's going to look better on her. So Faye, you don't know yet that that's your job, but it is. So anyway, I still really like the pattern, which didn't even mention, did I? It's a simple cable pattern that flows into the rib there and then all comes together in this kind of gather at the top. Just a nice textured pattern, easily memorisable, nice to knit, you know. Anyway, I wasn't 100% sold on that on me, and I thought, there's not really any point doing a redo of an old design if it's still, like, what's the point in rehashing it if I'm still not going to be 100% happy with it? So I tried again, had another go, and I thought I'd just go with an actual beanie this time. So this matches, as you can see, because it is the same yarn. So when I knit this sweater, obviously I used these yarns alternately. I didn't hold them together at any point, but I did think as I was knitting it, this would be such a nice fabric with them held together, because this particular mohair, which is the onion knit silk mohair, it has a very shiny core, similar to the Shibiri actually. Yeah, it's particularly shiny, and I just thought that would knit up really interestingly held together, which it did. Perfect for this time of year. If I turn it around, we might be able to see the cables a bit more. So this is a more obvious marl because obviously the core kind of shows up more. So this has a different fit. It's the same cable pattern, but on the slouchy version the brim is quite snug. It's snugger than the old original pattern, and then you increase out of the brim to get the slouch. Whereas here the rib is different because there are no increases after the rib, so the flow between cable and rib is slightly different. And yeah, it's the same stitch count until you get to the top. So I feel like this just suits me better. And I also, putting the pom-pom on made a massive difference to the hat. I don't know, it's obviously it doesn't like obscure the pattern, but I just felt like it balanced it. Don't know, it suits me better with that on. It's a bit of a clash with what I'm wearing here, but hopefully you get the idea. So it's nice and shiny, which I think is very cute. Pom-pom is just tied on. I always do that with pom-poms if I actually use them, just poke both the strings through and tie them there. It's not sewn on or anything, so I could easily take it off if I so wished. And I took some photos of this yesterday when I woke up and saw that the light was so nice and frosty and blue skies outside. I was like, oh my god, I've got to go and photograph things. So I was photographing them in the park with the backlighting, which is kind of tricky when you're on your own and you can only operate the camera remotely. But excuse me, I love how the photos turn out because the light coming through from behind with the pom-pom and the fuzzy fabrics, just love it. So I'll pop some of those photos here. I think I did quite a good job there considering I was by myself. Yeah, this is the Kirkstone hat. Can't remember if I mentioned the name. Pattern, I'm still just rejigging the formatting, that sort of stuff. But should be available very soon if you follow me on Instagram, Ravelry, newsletter, all of those places. I'll be sharing it very soon. And I think, nope, that's not even the last one. I've got another one to share with you. I'm just looking at kind of the scene of destruction around me, which generally follows me wherever I go. My mum will agree on that one. But particularly when I'm filming or photographing something, there's just mess everywhere. So I have two odd mittens here. The other two, the matching two, are somewhere in that pile, but this is enough. So another one that will be coming soon, / is from last year, is the burnished mittens that I designed for Jen Arnold Culliford's book, Confident Knitting. So that book was released last year and it was a different skill for every month of the year and a pattern to use that skill in with tutorials and everything. So I think mine was the June pattern. It was in summer anyway because it was a small pattern. And now the rights have returned to me so I can publish the pattern myself. I'm not going to put them on because I've got rings on, but here we go. So I have two different sizes here. I used Old Maiden Aunt sock yarn. I can't remember off the top of my head the colourway names. My technique was Vickle braids. So the pattern included techniques both for working single colour and 2 colour braids. And you might look at this and think, well, they're all clearly single colour because we have grey, then orange, then grey. But depending on where you are in the sequence, like here, it was an orange braid followed by the next round was orange. Whereas here, this was an orange braid followed by the next round being grey. I can't remember the specifics, but that was the general gist of it anyway. That meant that there were 2 different braid techniques involved to get the same end result. So there are tutorials for both in the pattern, which again I need to reformat because it's obviously in the book format with their layouts and their photos and everything. So I'm spending a lot of time in InDesign and Illustrator at the moment, and Photoshop and Lightroom and everything Adobe. How on earth would I cope without Adobe? Genuinely don't know. Anyway, Burnished Mittens I will be republishing on my Ravelry and everything very soon. So they're a nice little houndstooth pattern around the cuff because, I mean, there are lots of people doing colourwork patterns that are like all over and they're very traditional. And yeah, people do a beautiful job of those kind of all over colourwork things. But I thought it's not really me, it's not my skill set, there are people doing a better job of that. So I kept it to a fairly classic, simple, just a houndstooth pattern bordered by the braids there. So it's very simple and minimal, and then you can just whiz through the rest of it without worrying about colourwork, and it has the impact. So I really like those. Very glad to have the pattern back. Coming soon to a Ravelry near you. And I think that just about wraps everything up. Looking around me. Think so. It's weird because normally I'm like one garment to the next and I have a kind of rolling system of I'm doing one, then it's with test knitters, whilst I'm working on another one, then that's with test knitters, and so on. But now I've been kind of working on smaller scale things that haven't needed test knitting because they were already test knit years ago, or they're just like, you know, the houses and things like that. So it's been a lot more bitty projects, and I'm kind of now wrapping them all up and need to get my brain back into gear for making, I think a cardigan is next on my list because I haven't done a cardigan in a while. So I feel like I'm due one. But anyway, thanks very much for watching. If you've made it this far, please tell me what you've been working on. If you also kind of get the bug for making small things around this time of year. And yeah, it's been lovely to catch up, so I'll speak to you again soon. Bye!